Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here. Hope you're happy, healthy and well. It is time for a new book review. Now today I have the pleasure of reviewing Breasts and Eggs by Mieko Kawakami. And this book I was recommended by a viewer here on this channel called VS Iski, I think it is. My apologies if I said that incorrectly, who mentioned to me that I might like the work of Mieko Kawakami. And when I read that, I went to the library and I was really surprised that they had this book on the shelves. For some reason, I thought they wouldn't have Japanese authors. And that's why it's very surprising sometimes to just go to your library and peruse the shelves, check out what the books they have, because you might be pleasantly surprised about the types of authors and the types of books they are getting in. They might not always just get authors of the country that you're in. And I am actually quite lucky that my local library has such a diverse reading selection. So Mieko Kawakami is a young female Japanese, obviously, author who's written this book in 2020. I was really surprised by her background. She seems really talented, poet, singer-songwriter, and now author. I mean, wow. I mean, I would love to have, you know, skills like this that kind of span different jobs. But she's a young Japanese author who's really pushing the boundaries of Japanese patriarchy. And in particular, I was really interested to read about how she's really pushing, I guess, how females are also represented in Haruki Murakami's books, who is an author I love. Now, I love reading Japanese authors. There is something about this country that really fascinates me. It seems to be a country of what's the word? It just slipped my mind. You know, it's Western on the one hand, but it's Eastern on the other. It's progressive in one sense, but it's not progressive and traditional in the other. And so, you know, I hoped that one day that I would visit Japan. And in my past, yes, I did do Japanese classes. So one day maybe I'll even learn the language. But for now, I'm quite happy to read the books of Japanese authors to get a real kind of insight into the life of, you know, living and working in Tokyo or living and working in places like Osaka that is here, and the types of dialects and the types of lives they have in these books. It always fascinates me because I have this perception of Japan being quite busy and quite progressive. But it seems when I read books like this, there are parts that are quite traditional or quite local, locality driven, like dialects, like pronunciations, like different ways of how people talk to each other, which is all really fascinating. Even their language and written language apparently is quite different. But anyway, thank you to VS Whiskey who recommended this book to me. I found it in the library. I was really surprised how battered it looked, because it just meant that people borrowed this book. She's obviously a well-known author, and this book has obviously been read by a lot of people here in my local library, my local area. So that was surprising. Now, she wrote this in 2020, as I mentioned, and it's really two books. The first book is the breasts part, and the second book is the eggs part. I did that because the cat is on. That's it. Okay, so it's not an editing thing. So as I mentioned, there are two books. The first part, the breasts part, and the second, the eggs. Now, when I first got this book, the title really put me off in some way, and it shouldn't, because I really didn't know what it was about. But reading those two books together, it is obviously the elements of femininity. It's about breasts and eggs, and all females have them. Now, the first part of the book introduces us to Natsuoko, who is the protagonist here in the book. And she has an older sister called Midoroko. And Midoroko has a young daughter, about 13 years old, called Makiko. Now, sorry if I don't pronounce these names correctly, But ultimately, these three women, different ages, come from a very, very poor background. And Mikiko, the young daughter, 13 years old, is going through the change, and she's hating her body. She doesn't like anything about what she hears at school or what she's learning about being a female. She really doesn't like it. And so she journals in her book, and we have an opportunity to read those journals to see what she thinks. Now, poor Mikiko refuses to talk to her mother. She just basically one day ups and mutes, does not talk at all. And they don't know what is wrong. But out of the journals that we read from Mikiko, we realize that she has something that she just is against her body. She doesn't like what is happening, and she doesn't like these changes that she's experiencing. It seems to be unfair on her that she doesn't have a choice. And meanwhile, her mother is going through also her own emotional turmoil. She wants her breasts to be augmented, and she's completely obsessed with getting breast implants, to the point that it's actually, when you read it, it defies belief. You just don't understand how someone can be so obsessed. There is obviously some underlying emotional issue there, that she thinks that breasts will solve a problem. The thing is, these people are really poor. They're struggling. They are women who have somehow been let down by the men, the men in their life, both their father and also their husbands, who their father was violent and useless, as was Midoroko's husband, who was completely useless. So the men in this book don't get a good light, but at the same time, the men seem to be the ones who are in power in society, and it is the females who are going through a lot of difficulty in Japanese society and through different situations and circumstances, that you could feel that there is a change going about, that they're trying to fight the patriarchy. So the first book is all about the breast element, okay? The second part of the book, it is set in the future, about 10 years later, and we get introduced to Natsuko again, who is a wannabe writer. She's struggling to write her book, but she's in her 30s, and she does not have a relationship. She used to have a relationship, but she is asexual. She's not interested in sex. She doesn't want any sex. But at the same time, she too has her own obsession, and she's obsessed with having a child. She meets someone from online who is someone who is trying to find his own father, because he was conceived through artificial insemination. And this is a thing in Japan where they cannot find who the donors are based on the systems that they have. And so he's struggling to try and find his father and trying to make sense of his world and where he comes from and why he was conceived that way and who his father might be. But in the course of the book, Natsuko and he meet, and they talk about their own respective difficulties. They fall in love, but also he offers to be her donor, but doesn't want to be part of her life, if that makes sense. But throughout the book, what really grabbed me about this is, and all these parts are, all these little post-it notes are situations that happen to females that is kind of normal in normal everyday life, but can also be quite traumatic in the sense that we get to learn a lot about how females are treated in Japanese society, and it's not good. We learn about the difficulties they have in being able to have a voice and to stand their own ground and to basically be given equality in a very patriarchal society. The post-it notes were all the places where I thought, man, you know, we're talking women who have grief, who have experienced loss, women who are desperate to have children and yet are single but can't have children. There are women who have lost their wonderful husbands and now would have to look after their mothers-in-laws, because that's a thing that you do in Japanese society, and their mother-in-law might hate them. The other thing that was a real shock to me was the fact that how the females treat each other, how females treat other females, and the differences there. There's no, I guess, constancy, or there's no pattern saying they're going to help each other or they support each other. In fact, females can be as nasty to each other as they can be to men as well. So there is, what we get here in this book is just kind of like a real combination of different circumstances that females in this world find themselves in. Females who get pregnant who don't want their children, females who get pregnant who love their children, females who lose their husbands who they hate, females who lose their husbands who they don't like, females who lose their fathers who abuse them, fathers who sell their bodies off, fathers who love them, fathers. So you get all these combinations here. And there is, even in the first part of the book, a situation with a trans female in a sauna in a Japanese bathhouse, which you start to think and contemplate, shit, okay, what would I have done in that situation? So I'll leave you to read that part of the book, because I think mistakenly there's a lot more conversation about that part, that component in this book, when I don't think we should actually zone in on that only, when there are so many other situations of what it means to be female in this book in Japanese society. So look, I love this book. It was a real surprise. I read it in a couple of days, and look how thick it is. Like, it is a, I'm not going to say an easy read, because you don't feel easy. You feel a bit, as you read it, you go, shit, you know, God, they have a long way to go in their society, as do we, but the Japanese even more so. So, highly recommended book for the year, a quite surprising book for the year. Don't get put off by the title. I think it's meant to kind of make you sit back. It is I'd be interested if any men have read this and what they think. This is a very female book. I would say that possibly men would have a different perception of this book, simply because they don't go through what females go through every single day of their life. It's just different. They're different, you know. But I'd be really interested to see what men think about this book. For females, you got to read it. You got to read it. It's fascinating. It is totally fascinating. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I've got to get going. So thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. Bye for now. And sorry about that shock that I gave you. The cat is finally off the furniture. All right then. Thanks for listening. Bye.